Welcome back. It's no longer news that the Nigerian government is still working out the provision of constant electricity to its teeming population, kicked off by the sale of PHCN to private owners. What may be new is the move by the Lagos State government to tackle its power generation and distribution headlong with the backing of Nigeria's new power policy. Our correspondent, Loretta Chiogo, reports that the state commences the 7th biannual economic summit tomorrow to draw investors in power supply into the state.
Lagos, with an estimated population of 21 million people, is the commercial nerve center of Nigeria. The coastal state prides itself as a megacity, as it, among other things, has the largest portion of the non-oil sector, but has just 1,000 megawatts of power supply from the national grid. A figure seen as a far cry from the needed supply to power businesses and homes in the state for 24 hours. Perhaps the theme for the 7th Lagos Economic Summit, Powering the Lagos Economy, Real Opportunities, Endless Possibilities, seeks to solve this major challenge.
The new owners of the PHCN assets, that is the Eco Distribution Company, Ikeja Distribution Company, who have bought into the distribution infrastructure of Lagos State, I see them having an opportunity to see that, wow, they bought the right assets, and then for them to see that that's where they put their money.
I mean, this is the whole purpose of the Lagos Economic Summit, is to try and create an avenue for the private sector and the public sector dialogue, is to get all the stakeholders, both at the federal and the state level, to work together. Now that the private sector is in the driving seat, ECO, Ikeja, Egbe, and any other power plant that is licensed to operate, how do we make all of them work together to solve the challenge? And I think, that's the beauty of the summit.
Experts say Lagos needs about 10,000 megawatts to power its thriving economy to make the state more competitive.
Proper fuel to Lagos, in this case, I think gas, in the right quantities, to provide enough generation capacities to at least provide the power, so that distribution then becomes a secondary problem. I think there are a couple of options to look at. One is to have an alternative to the Escravos-Lagos pipeline that we have now, which is essentially a government-controlled pipeline. I think we need to begin to think about alternatives. There's talk about gas offshore Lagos. My personal view, the gas offshore Lagos will be some time in coming, but there's plenty of gas towards the east of Nigeria, the coast of Lagos, which, working with the federal government, working with the private sector, working with NNPC, we must find a way.
Lagos has been able to generate about 40 megawatts through the public-private partnership, and that's only for its public institutions under the captive power policy. Now, the state's plan to have a power-steady relationship with private investors in generating and distributing electricity to its teeming population will be termed successful only with a consistent national power transmission. Loretta Chiogo, Channels Television News.
To throw more light on the economic summit beginning tomorrow, I'm being joined on the news at 10 by Mr. Segun Olujobi, a member of the Management Committee of the Lagos Economic Summit. You're welcome to the news at 10.
Thank you.
Can we go back a couple of years? In 2012, this summit was also held, and you focused at that time on housing, transportation, and power. But we're still talking about power, and it's quite depressing hearing that the growth rate is just between 2% and 7%. So have there been any real gains within the last 2 years?
Absolutely. I think the way to look at it is that given the way the laws of the country work, Lagos State is constrained to providing embedded power for its own facilities. And within that constraint, I think Lagos has done an excellent job. Before the last summit, there was only one independent power plant at Akute. Since then, 2 new power plants have been built. One is Island Power, and the other is the Ikeja Power, IPP. The IPP in Ikeja is for the Secretariat, so you find today there's 24-hour electricity in the seat of government. And I think it's the only state government that has 24-hour electricity. And that obviously is something. I mean, it means the civil servants are able to work better. It means the quality of work they're doing, productivity is higher. Perhaps the one that has the most impact on the people has been the one in Lagos Island, where the island maternity, Lion building, I think at the last count, almost 20 schools are all powered by this IPP. The impact on child mortality at the hospital, the impact on education, security, for example. Since that last summit as well, over 200 streets, I think about 250 streets have been lighted, and over 10,000 poles. The impact on security has been immense. The impact on light life has been significant. So there has been progress. But like I said, Lagos is constrained under the laws of Nigeria to only deal with those things that are examined.
Okay, so here we are now, 2014, and the 7th Lagos Economic Summit. Well, Lagos is the commercial capital of Nigeria, but the truth is that businesses are closing by the day. So looking ahead, or moving forward, if you like, what tangible results do you really expect to see from this summit?
I think the objective of this summit is to say, look, we've had a significant change in the way the industry has been run and managed. Now it's a private sector-led sector. Now the regulatory framework is becoming clearer and better. We can sit back and say things are all it's going to work well and fine. I think the purpose of this summit is to accelerate that, to make it happen faster, to create an avenue for the private sector and the public sector to have a handshake, and for industry to come and say, this is what we need, these are the challenges, and for government to play its own part, both at the national and the subnational level. If you look at the summit, we're going to have the people from the federal regulatory agency be part of it. The private sector are going to have the new buyers of the three companies that are the main providers of power on the island. And so it's working together to accelerate, to look at ways of making things happen. So one thing is to assume and lay back and decide nothing's going to happen, but I think what we're trying to do is to try and create a platform so a dialogue can happen and we can see tangible benefit very quickly.
Well, very quickly too, this summit claims to offer real opportunities and endless possibilities. It might be ambitious, but is there any possibility in solar energy or hydroelectric power, for instance?
I think clearly part of Lagos' state strategy, and they have a very excellent agency, the Lagos Electricity Board, that's been doing a lot of thinking around conservation, is to think about all the sources of energy, of which renewable is a very important one. Solar is a very interesting piece of part of the energy mix. But the truth about it is everywhere in the world, solar is still a small component of power. And if you're talking about heavy lifting, most of that is still being done by traditional ways of either hydro or fossil fuel generated power. Hydro, on the other hand, Lagos, even though it's very close to water, the sort of you need big rivers with a lot of flow to make hydro work. So hydro will not be what works for us. Hydro works, up in the north where the rivers are very wide and so on.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Olujobi, for coming on to the news at 10. We wish you a very successful summit.
Thank you very much.
I've been talking with a member of the Management Committee of the Lagos Economic Summit, Mr. Segun Olujobi, and talking about business. It's time now for business news, and Adeshawa George is standing by.
Hello and welcome to Business News. Now, for those who have wondered why the rebased GDP does not include data on the current rate of unemployment in the country, well, the Statistician General of the Federation, Mr. Yemi Kale, says there is no proper measure to determine that at the moment. According to him, all hands are on deck to ensure that the adequate figures would be released as soon as possible. The last data on unemployment dates back to 2011 at 23.9%.
The ILO's definition for unemployment requires you to only work for at least an hour a week. So once you've worked an hour a week, you are considered employed as far as the ILO definition is concerned. And we felt we could not use that because that did not reflect the reality in Nigeria. When we used that for Nigeria, we got an unemployment rate of less than 1%. And there's no way I'm going to release that to the Nigerian public. That's because Nigerians are entrepreneurial. If you go out and ask any Nigerian, did you work for an hour a week, you'll find that almost everybody did. So what we did to solve that problem was we now use the benchmark, 40 hours a week, so which is the definition of full-time employment in Nigeria. So if you're not working full-time, 40 hours a week, you are considered unemployed. That means if you work 39 hours a week, you are considered unemployed, which is also incorrect. So because we felt that we did not have a proper measure, methodology, we are still trying to decide what the best way to address this is. We decided, you know what, until we are done with the work, rather than giving out figures that mislead in either overstating or understating the problem, let's work on what we think is a ideal methodology. Let's talk to experts, and when we are done and we have something that we believe can be used, we will now come up and update our figures.